On today's show, I'll be making bold predictions for some of the Mets' top prospects this season.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, today we're going to do 10 bold predictions for some of the top prospects in the Mets system. Every year I do this for the MLB roster, 10 bold predictions for all the different players, and I go through the team and find some things that I'm looking for. This year, one bold prediction might be Francisco Alvarez hitting 40 home runs, something along those lines. So figured, why don't we do that with the farm system? Done a lot of shows recently breaking down this farm from my top 10, which we'll actually go through right now for those of you who aren't aware of it. I did a full show breaking this down, but my top 10 prospects heading into the season: Jet Williams, number 1, Drew Gilbert, number 2, Luisangel Acuña, number 3, Christian Scott, number 4, Ryan Clifford, number 5, Ronnie Mauricio, number 6, Blade Tidwell, number 7, Mike Vassell, number 8, Colin Houck at 9, and Kevin Parada rounding out the top 10. So I did that show. I did a show about guys outside of the top 10, looking at some of the names you should know could have big seasons. And now we're going to kind of combine everything we've learned into a prediction episode here. So I got 10 predictions, and we're going to start right at the top of the farm system. Of course, that's Jet Williams. My prediction is that Jet Williams will finish this season as a top 10 prospect in all of baseball. Now, he's ranked as high as number 23 right now by Baseball Prospectus. Baseball America has him at number 30. Maybe that's not the boldest prediction to some, but look, to be a top 10 prospect in the game, it's very rare. I mean, Francisco Alvarez was that for the Mets, but they haven't had a lot of top 10 prospects in the game lately. And when you get to that level, generally you're starting to verge towards can't miss. So I believe Jet Williams is going to spend most of this year in the minor leagues, if not all. But by year's end, when all those top 100 lists start coming out heading into next year, or even the end of year ones, we're going to start seeing Jet in that top 10. Drew Gilbert, my bold prediction for him is that he's going to start 50 games for the Mets in 2024. That is a lot of games for a guy that is not going to start the season on the big league roster. But I believe by the second half, we're going to see Drew Gilbert as a starting right fielder for the New York Mets. That can happen in a couple different forms. Actually, I should say a starting outfielder, because I could see Harrison Bader not performing up to the level the Mets need, and that would necessitate Gilbert being in center. I could see Starling Marte not performing up to what the Mets need or being hurt, and that could necessitate Gilbert in right. But I think what's going to happen with Drew Gilbert, he's going to start the year in AAA. He's going to have really good numbers, and he's going to force the Mets' hand, and eventually they're going to put him into that starting lineup, and they're not going to take him out of it much. So I got Drew Gilbert as probably the prospect that plays the most this year, logs the most innings. Luisangel Acuña obviously could find his way on the roster as well, but I think Gilbert a little more MLB ready, and he is going to graduate this season. That's essentially what playing 50 games would do for him, with the amount of plate appearances he would rack up. All right, Luisangel Acuña. This was a fun one because I was trying to think of what a bold prediction would be. If I said Acuña is going to debut this year, not really bold. If I said he's going to start 50 games, well, I'm right there, piggybacking off what I'm saying with Gilbert. I don't think that both of these guys are starting players by the end of the season. Instead, I went a different route. I think Luisangel Acuña will steal more bases than his brother in 2024. And that's a bold prediction because Ronald Acuña Jr. won the MVP last year and stole 73 bases. His little brother was behind at 57 stolen bases. But two things are factoring into why I believe Luisangel could actually outsteal Ronald this year. For one, there's already been not a crazy injury scare, but definitely something to monitor where Ronald Acuña Jr. ended up with some soreness in his meniscus in his knee. Same knee that he tore a couple years ago. I don't know if he's going to steal 70 bases again. Maybe they put a little bit of a leash on him a little bit. Maybe he just is a little more conservative. Also, I mean, the Braves are playing for, the World Series. They don't really need to be going as all out in the regular season. Now, Ronald Acuña Jr., it's very tough to tell him to do anything but play all out. But I'm thinking maybe this year, instead of stealing 70 bases, maybe Ronald Acuña Jr. settles somewhere in the 50s. And I think if Luisangel can get on base, if he can stay healthy, he's going to steal a lot of bases in AAA because that's going to be his real calling card to get that promotion up. So I think Acuña is going to steal 60 this year, and Ronald Acuña might steal a little bit less than that. So that's my third bold prediction. Number 4, Ryan Clifford is going to be the first Mets prospect since Pete Alonso to hit 30 home runs in a season. I also predict he's going to be the Mets player of the year when it comes to the hitters. Last time that a Mets prospect hit 30 home runs, like I mentioned, Pete Alonso, he had 36 in 2018. Clifford had 24 home runs last year between his time with the Mets and the Astros. That was in 115 games played. This year, I imagine he's still going to start off in high A, but could quickly end up in double A. I think he's going to have a long season. He's going to hit a lot of home runs. I would not even be surprised if he could push for the 35 home runs that Alonso cleared in 2018. I don't know if he's going to hit 40 as a prospect. That's a ton. But I think Ryan Clifford's going to have a huge season. And I would not be surprised at all if by the end of the year, he's a top 3 prospect in the organization, especially because you might see some graduations above him. Again, I had Clifford at number 5 in my own prospect rankings heading into this season. Christian Scott, to round out the top 5 prospects in this system, I had him at number 4. I really thought long and hard about some bold predictions I could make for him, right? Christian Scott's going to make his MLB debut this year. That's not really bold. I think that happens. Christian Scott is going to make a playoff start. I tossed that one around in my brain a little bit. Could he be one of those guys that ends up called up a little bit later on in the year? The Mets make a push. He's one of the 4 guys that are getting the ball if the Mets actually go for a playoff run. That'd be a super bold take. And I couldn't actually make it because the one thing about Christian Scott, last year he threw 87 and 2/3 innings pitched. I don't know if he's going to get ramped up much beyond 120 innings this year. And depending on how they stagger them, I think he could be shut down at some point. So couldn't make one there. I thought about saying Christian Scott's going to get 10 holds this year because maybe he ends up in a multi-inning reliever role. Ultimately, I just settled on passing, on making a bold prediction for Christian Scott. He's already ascended further than I think anyone would have expected last year to be now considered a top pitching prospect in the system. It's going to be really exciting to watch what he does this year, whether he starts in Binghamton or Syracuse. Regardless, it's going to be nice to watch another full season of him and see his development continue. But I passed on making a bold prediction there. I also passed on our number 6 prospect in the system, Ronnie Mauricio. I thought about getting a little crazy and said, hey, Ronnie Mauricio might start a playoff game. But then I remembered the recent timetable the Mets put out after his surgery was 8 to 12 months. It's hard to predict that he's going to get healthy enough to actually contribute at the end of this season. Best case scenario, yeah, maybe he comes back in September and can be on the roster at the end of the bench by the time you get to the playoffs. But if you're just looking for someone to steal bases and fill positions in the playoffs, Acuña is probably the better bet to be on a playoff roster. Hey, that could have been a bold prediction I could have made as well, but I digress. So there are first top 6 prospects. The predictions are Jet Williams, top 10 prospect in all of baseball, Drew Gilbert to start 50 games, Luisangel Acuña to steal more bases than his brother, and Ryan Clifford to be the player of the year and to eclipse 30 home runs, and the player of the year of the Mets system, I should say, eclipse 30 home runs this season. We got 6 more predictions, a lot more of this farm system to cover. I'll get to all of it in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for your retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, a member of SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Also, right now, you got MLB futures. So if you want to bet on the Mets to win the World Series, then hit their over on their season-long win total of 81.5. You can find all of that over at FanDuel. And again, you can get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. I have 6 more bold predictions for some of the top prospects in the Mets system. But first, I want to touch on each player in the top 10 and where my head was at trying to make predictions. So Mike Vasil and Blade Tidwell, who I had Tidwell at 7, Vasil at 8 in my top 10. I didn't make a prediction on either of them. I could have said Vasil's going to make his MLB debut, but I don't think that's a bold prediction. He has already logged a lot of time in AAA. He's within the top 10 starting pitchers in the depth chart, I would think, right now. And when it comes to an MLB season, a lot of those guys are going to make a spot start at some point. So I didn't think it was bold enough to say, hey, Vasil's going to make his debut. Blade Tidwell, I thought about making the prediction that he's going to win pitcher of the year. And I do think he is the favorite because Dom Hamill won it 2 years ago. Christian Scott won it last year. I think Vasil might spend a decent amount of time in the big leagues. So Tidwell, as a really talented pitcher who's in AA, makes the most sense to take home that award this year. But I don't think that's that bold because of all the things I just laid out. And then Colin Houck, who had at number 9, I also did not make a prediction on him because he's logged 9 games. I thought about saying he's going to be the minor league player of the year, but the more I thought about Ryan Clifford, and when I predicted that Clifford was going to hit 30 home runs, I couldn't envision a world where Clifford clears 30 home runs, playing in high A and double A, and Houck somehow is the player of the year over him, right? So that one didn't make sense to me. The last player in my top 10, I do have a bold prediction on. That's Kevin Parada. And I think that Kevin Parada is not even going to be a top 20 prospect by the end of the year. And now you're going to wonder, why did I even put him in my top 10? I think I made a mistake there. I felt the pressure to include Kevin Parada in the top 10 because of how he's regarded by some fans, from how he's still ranked among pretty much everyone's top 10 in this system. When you look at all the different scouting lists out there, they, for the most part, still consider him that good because he's a former first-round pick. He had great numbers in college, and the thought is he could have a breakout season this year. But everything we saw in the Arizona Fall League, the limited at-bats in spring training, what he did last year offensively, I just feel like he's going to keep getting exposed by upper-level pitching. And so I'm not very high on him. I probably should have excluded him from my top 10, and I think that he's going to drop off a cliff this year in rankings. So there's the one maybe negative bold prediction I have in this entire show, but I had to include at least one. There's a guy I'm down on right now. It's him. So I hope he proves me wrong, clearly. I mean, look, it's great when you're down on a prospect and they shove it on you. So that's what I'm hoping for here. And a guy that I think can absolutely do that is Alex Ramirez, another guy that was part of a show I did earlier this offseason, or probably about a month ago now, where I broke down prospects whose stock has dropped in the last year, and Parada and Ramirez were the two I really talked about. I think he's going to redeem himself this year. Everything that you're reading about Alex Ramirez, particularly there's a great article that Tim Healy wrote in Newsday, is discussing him as a guy that put a lot of work in this offseason, going to the Mets Dominican Academy 5 days a week to shorten his swing, get himself in a good position. And I think he's going to have a big year in Double-A. I also think, and this is where it gets bolder than just saying he's a top 10 prospect by the end of the year again, I think he's going to make his MLB debut as a September call-up. I think he's going to have a nice year. And when the rosters expand, because he's already on the 40, I think we'll actually see him at the end of the season. So looking forward to Alex Ramirez this year. Definitely one of the guys I think that is as must watch as you have in the system right now because of that volatility of him going either way. My 7th prediction, Brandon Sproat will finish the year in Double-A and will be considered a top 3 pitching prospect in this system by year's end. So Sproat is going to have his first real full season in the Mets farm system this year. Imagine he starts off in St. Lucie. So to say he ends up in Double-A is a bold prediction. I think he's going to cruise through St. Lucie, make his way up into High A, where he'll spend most of his season. And I think he'll get a late call up to Double-A, maybe when some other guys move up. When Tidwell moves from Double-A to Triple-A, maybe Sproat ends up getting that bump up to Double-A. To be a top 3 prospect in this system when it comes to the pitchers also, I think, is another bold take because you still do have Scott, Vassell, Tidwell, Hamill, a lot of arms that have been progressing well. Even guys like Tyler Stewart or Joander Suarez. The Mets have, all of a sudden a bevy of pitching prospects coming, but the upside of Sproat is there. I think that Vassell graduates, and then I believe it's going to be Scott, Tidwell, and Sproat as the top 3 prospects heading into next year. That's assuming that Scott doesn't graduate himself. Number 8 for my bold predictions, I have Jacob Rhymer being a top 10 prospect by the end of this year. Now, he is, depending on where you look, somewhere in the 15 to 20 range by most publications. But again, there's a lot of good prospects in the system that might not be falling off the list. So for Jacob Rhymer to get in there, he's going to have a really big year. And he did have a nice first season last year. He put up a .412 on-base percentage in Port St. Lucie. That was as a 19-year-old. He literally just turned 20 in February. He got the call up to High A, spent 25 games in Brooklyn. He hit .203, but he still got on base at a .354 clip. The slug went away entirely when he got up there. He definitely has to improve, but it was a 19-year-old playing in High A. I think this year with a full season at that level, you're going to see him growing into his power a little bit more. Hopefully the defense continues to progress at third base. I think he will be considered the best third base prospect in this system by the end of the year. You could already make the argument that he is if you don't call Ronnie Mauricio a third base prospect, and I think he's more util at this point. You could just say he's already there because there's just not a lot of third base prospects. But I believe by year's end, that's going to be a little more cemented in stone that that's his position for one. And, he's going to get on base at a really good clip. That plate discipline, I don't think is going to go anywhere. If he can tap into a little bit more power, maybe he can get up to 15 home runs. All of a sudden, you're talking about a really intriguing prospect who will be young. And who knows, he might even find his way to Double-A in a late season promotion by the end of next year. And then he's starting to get a little bit closer. So I really like him as a prospect, and I will be interested to see how he does in Brooklyn this season. My number 9 prediction here of my top 10 bold predictions is Nate Lavender. He's a prospect, right? We've seen him all spring. He's looked dominant. I believe that Lavender will make 40 MLB appearances. So I think he's going to get called up at some point, and he's going to force their hand. Well, he's going to be up in a hurry, and he's going to quickly get into that inner circle of trust for Carlos Mendoza in that bullpen and be potentially even a high leverage reliever. I think the sky is the limit for Nate Lavender. On top of the 40 MLB appearances, I think he's going to strike out 75 batters. Last year, he pitched 54 and a third, most of that in Syracuse. He had 86 strikeouts. We've seen him this spring racking up strikeouts. I think the K's will continue to come, and this year they're going to come at the big league level. My last bold prediction, Nolan McLean will post a 750 OPS and a sub-4 ERA. The Mets have a two-way player. In college, McLean had a 957 OPS as a hitter, but the Mets are really intrigued with him as a pitcher. So we'll see exactly what his season ends up looking like, how much run he gets at doing both. Right now, all indications are he's going to remain a two-way player at this time. Last year, he only got a couple games hitting in Syracuse. I think he had 8 games and a couple of pitching appearances. Now he's going to get a full season in St. Lucie. Might end the year in high A. Who knows if he can even get further than that. But I'm really intrigued by him as a pitcher. But that college OPS, you can't ignore it. So it's going to be fun to see if he can actually pull this off and remain a two-way player by the end of this year. If he can post a 750 OPS and a sub-4 ERA, I think he will still be a two-way player heading into 2025. So my bold prediction is really more to try to keep him as a two-way player, but I think that's how he's going to get there. Now, I did call this episode a top 10 list of bold predictions. I've been discussing it as a top 10 throughout the show, but I do have one more bold prediction about a guy that we're not really considering a prospect anymore, but he technically still has rookie status. And I think he's going to play a role in the roster in a big way this year because he just had another great outing in camp. I'm talking about Jose Butto. I'm going to break down what he did on Thursday and his role a little bit more in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides you with access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. I know I love my Fire TV stick because it's mobile, right? You can have it in the living room, have your whole setup, and then if you go on a vacation, you just unplug it, take it with you, throw it in the backpack, and all of a sudden you have your living room TV in the hotel room. It's awesome. And Fire TV recently created their Fire TV channels that deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more. Keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The best MLB season preview is going to be coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Again, that's March 20th at 7 p.m. You can be the first to local insight from all of our MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it March 20th, 7 p.m. on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, Jose Butto was awesome. On Thursday, pitched 4 scoreless, allowed 2 hits, walked 2, struck out 3. He now has a 0.90 ERA this spring. He's allowed 1 run in 10 innings pitched. And he touched 97 on the gun today, and his changeup, as always, that's his best pitch, was nasty. I mean, he got batters to swing through it about half the time, got 13 swings. 6 of them were swings and misses. He looks solid. He looks comfortable. He's got his whole arsenal working for him, and he's pounding the zone. He's another guy that the Mets have right now that provides them with starter depth. If they wanted to, they could go to a 6-man rotation, and they could have him with that group from jump here. And they might decide to do that. The only reason why I don't believe that they would actually go to a 6-man rotation is because, for one, he has an option. You can keep him stretched out in the minor leagues and just wait till you need him. There's 5 off days in the first 25 games played. There's so many relievers that are pitching well. Adam Ottavino pitched another scoreless inning with 2 strikeouts. Austin Adams, who's got that funky delivery and he throws the slider 90% of the time. He's had a great spring. He struck out the side on Thursday, so he's really winning himself a job, but it's a non-roster invite, so there might not be a job to be won, which would be unfortunate for him, but he's going to have an impact at some point this season. Yohan Ramirez pitched 2 scoreless today and struck out 4. Did give up a hit, but he looks like a guy who's going to be on this team. I'd be shocked if he wasn't at this point, honestly, because he doesn't have any options. He's on the 40, obviously. So I don't think they would be able to pass him through waivers. I believe Ramirez is going to make the team. Sean Reed-Foley has looked good. Maybe he's the guy they try to pass through waivers. And that's if they want to put Butto on. You still have Shintaro Fujinami. You still have Michael Tonkin. David Stearns did such a good job building out this bullpen that he's probably has about 11 really good options for opening day. And that's not even including Jose Butto. And if they add Butto and go to a 6-man rotation, you're one more arm short of the pen. So Butto might just be, in for some tough luck right now. But a bold prediction would be that he's going to get 100 innings pitched this year. Right now, I don't see how that happens with all the depth the Mets have, but I'm still going to predict it because I didn't have him throwing 42 innings last year, and he did. So these things just seem to work themselves out. And I think he's pretty squarely ahead of Joey Lucchesi on the depth chart right now. Obviously, David Peterson could factor into the mix at some point. You hope Kodai Senga makes a quick return, which I guess will push him to more like number 7 on the depth chart. But you never know. I mean, they might end up having him in the bullpen pitching, long relief too. So really exciting to see where he ends up at the end of this year, because he was a guy that at one point was definitely a top 20 prospect. I don't know. Some lists might have had him at the back end of a top 10 at some point. Realistically, I think the highest he ever got was the 15 range, if my memory serves. Last year, he didn't pitch well in AAA. The year before that, he sort of fell a little bit more as a prospect, but he's a stretched out, at least long man capable reliever. But I honestly think he's proven himself to be a guy that can be a nice little back end starter for you. So great outing again. And I imagine we got what? He probably has one more opportunity to make a case for himself. And like I said, David Stearns has some tough decisions. On the hitting front, not a lot to speak about. It was a tie game of zeros on Thursday for the Mets and the Cardinals. The Mets only got 3 hits. Brett Beatty had one of them. He was 1 for 3. Zach Short had the other 2. He was 2 for 3. No one else got a hit. Pete Alonso drew a walk. And Luke Voit, 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts. So that is pretty rough. I just thought of Darren Ruff because of strikeouts and the name. Regardless, that DH competition, I think Voit has all but eliminated himself from it. Came into camp with his chest puffed out because, well, for one, he's jacked. But 2, he said, I'm going to go out and win a job. I don't think he's won one. I think that last spot on the bench, assuming the Mets don't make a signing, it's going to come down to DJ Stewart or G-Man Choi. I really think that's where we're at here. But regardless, that's going to be all for today's episode of Locked On Mets. I might be doing a Saturday show. I'll be watching the spring breakout game, which is on, I think it's at 3:30 on SNY. I also believe you can go to MetsRise. I think they're going to be able to live stream it somehow. I saw a tweet from Mike Mayer today of MetsRise, and I'm pretty sure I saw that. So that's pretty exciting if they can actually, have that available to people. But you're going to be able to find it in some capacity. And it's watching some of the Mets' top prospects go up against the Nationals' top prospects in kind of a showcase game. So if there's some stuff that happens there that I decide is worth mentioning, maybe I'll do a Saturday show. Of course, the Mets are going to play as well. So you might see a 2-segment Saturday episode. If you don't want to miss that, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on the audio side, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We want to make that push to 10,000 subs. So I appreciate all of you who keep subscribing. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day and your first watch. And after your second watch, Locked On has launched the first ever National Sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available as well on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channel. So again, go to Locked On Sports today. It's here for you for 24/7 coverage of all the top stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. You can find that on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV channels.